Hello class. I am going to do the back page of the section 1.4 handout for you guys. The instructions on top say perform the indicated operations and write the result in standard form. Caution. Now the caution, as you may recall from class, is that when you're dealing with square roots of negative numbers, we know we're going to have imaginary numbers in our answer. So you have to simplify the square roots first. You have to simplify the square roots first, or else things can go wrong. So let's start with number 13. Number 13 says 2 times the square root of negative 16. And now that we've learned about the imaginary number I, we know that the square root of negative 16 will be 4i. Okay? Plus 5 times the square root of negative 49. The square root of negative 49 is 7i. Now we multiply 8i plus 35i and add like terms, and that will be 43i. That was easy. Okay? Let's try number 14. Number 14, when I'm simplifying these radicals, you need to remember to factor. So on this first one, I'm going to do it the long way. 5 times the square root of negative 48. So I have 5. Underneath my square root, I'm going to factor. I'm going to think of negative 48 as negative 1 times. Now try to think of the biggest perfect square that goes into 48. That would be 16 times 3 is 48. Excellent. Now let's do the same thing with the second term. So let's move that over. The second term is 2 times the square root of negative 27. So plus 2 square root. Again, I'm going to have negative 1. 27 is 9 times 3. Okay. Now, let's take out the square roots that we can. So this becomes 5 times the square root of 16 is 4, the square root of negative 1 is I, and the square root of 3 has to stay in. Plus 2 times the square root of 9 is 3, the square root of negative 1 is I, the square root of 3 has to stay in. Now let's multiply 20i square root 3 plus 6i square root 3. Now remember, technically the I should be in the very back, but because I'm a little sloppy, sometimes it looks like my I is underneath the square root, so I leave it in front of the square root symbols. Now these are alike. They both have an I and a square root of 3, so I know my final answer is 26i square root 3. Okay? Now number 15 we did in class, so let's look at 16. Number 16, now we're going to have to FOIL. Be careful. You must simplify the square roots first. Even though we can't simplify these much, you have to pull the I out first. So this is really 3 plus I square root 5 times 2 plus I square root 2. Now multiply that out and simplify completely. Okay? If you don't take out the i's first, remember the sign gets messed up. I'll let you guys finish that one on your own. Number 17, let's look at 17. Okay, again I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to try and simplify as much as I can first and then go from there. So let's see. This will be the square root of 10 minus, now let's try and do the square root of negative 64 in our heads. Let's see. That's 8, isn't it? The square root of 64 is 8, so that would be 8i. The next one is square root of 10 plus 8i. Now let's look at that. We saw these in class, right? These are complex conjugates of each other. And so we know when we multiply two conjugates, we are always going to get the difference of squares. So I'm going to do this the semi-long way. I'm going to get the square root of 10 squared minus 64i squared. Now simplify. Square root of 10 squared is just 10. This becomes plus 64 because I squared is really negative 1, and so your final answer is 74. Excellent.